latest country to announce plans to withdraw from the International Criminal Court, being the ICC, joining a growing number of states, particularly in the Sahel, questioning the legitimacy and fairness of the Hague-based tribunal. The military government says the ICC has shown limited effectiveness and accuses it of disproportionately targeting African nations, with the majority of its investigations focused on the continent. Chad now follows the likes of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger in signalling a break from the court, raising fresh concerns about the future of international justice and accountability. To unpack the implications of this decision, we're joined by Africa analyst and publisher of Africa Briefing, Jonathan Offei-Ansah. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time and welcome.
You're welcome.
Chad says the ICC is biased against Africa. In terms of helping us understand this, is this a legitimate criticism or perhaps a convenient excuse to avoid accountability? What do you make of it?
There is a legitimate criticism, at the heart of Chad's arguments. The ICC's record has been disproportionately African, especially during its first 2 decades. While alleged crimes involving powerful Western countries and their allies often appear to receive less urgent attention. So the imbalance has damaged confidence in the court and reinforced the belief that international justice is more easily imposed on weaker states. But let me add that that does not automatically make Chad's withdrawal justified.
Mm-hmm.
A government, cannot simply point to double standards elsewhere and conclude that its own officials should no longer face external scrutiny. So selective justice is not a problem, but the alternative cannot be no justice at all.
Yeah.
And again, let me also point out that it is important to remember that several African cases reached the ICC through referrals by African governments themselves, including Uganda, DRC, the Central African Republic, and Mali. So the court did not independently impose every African investigation. And also, the real question, therefore, is whether Chad wants a fairer system of justice or less accountability. So its future conduct will provide the answer. And if it strengthens independent domestic controls and supports credible African judicial institutions, its position will carry greater weight. If prosecutions disappear, then the bias argument would look like a convenient shield.
So as you emphasize, perhaps really just point out whether Chad wants a fairer system of justice or, really just looking at less accountability. Chad argues that the ICC has been ineffective and unfairly targets African countries. You've spoken a little bit about this, but do you think at all that the criticism is supported by evidence, or are we really just looking at a political rather than factual motive as we assess the credibility of such a move?
Well, I would say it is a bit of both, political and justice, if you like. Okay, and again, let me also stress that the ICC clearly has that credibility, problem, in Africa. The figure cited by Chad, 9 out of 13 investigations involving African countries, reinforces a long-standing perception that the court's attention has been distributed unevenly.
So what role has the changing political landscape, do you think, in the Sahel has played in this growing wave of withdrawals from the ICC. I mean, we're talking Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, all signaling a break from the court as they raise these fresh concerns about the future of international justice and accountability.
It is not just a break from the courts. It's a break from the rest of West Africa, breaking from ECOWAS, severing relations with its former colonial power, France, right, and trying to establish its own unified defense force, trying to establish its own common biometric passport, and so on and so forth. So moving from the ICC is just another step in asserting their sovereignty. Okay, so I don't see anything out of the ordinary or anything wrong, with that. The three countries, the AU, the Alliance of Sahel States, are trying to assert, their sovereignty in a way that maybe both of us haven't seen before.
Yeah. And in asserting that sovereignty, what do you make of the sentiment that the ICC only steps in when national courts are unable or perhaps unwilling to prosecute serious crimes? Is Chad, as we try and interpret this move, trying to say that it can hold perpetrators accountable on its own? Is that the message that we're getting from such a move as well?
That is the message, because if you are an outside body, international body, with a jurisdiction over all member states who signed to the Rome Treaty, I do think that body is, is not allowed, to try, political cases or whatever, from your country. Then you must be able to, again, demonstrate, beyond a reasonable doubt that you will be able to bring offenders, let me put it mildly, offenders within your jurisdiction to book.
There's also the argument from critics, who've long argued that powerful countries outside Africa have escaped similar scrutiny. Do you think at all, just looking at the work of the ICC, have they done enough in recent years to address accusations of so-called selective justice?
You see, let me make this clear. Let me maybe explain that. Look, I mean, the ICC was set up under the Rome Treaty, the Treaty of Rome. Okay.
Yes.
So if you are not a signatory to that treaty, there's no way the ICC can get anybody from your country, and try them. We'll talk about the USA, for example. It's never been, a signatory to that treaty. So the ICC cannot try anybody, or any American for that matter. So it's a question of, membership. If you've signed up for it, okay, you fall under their jurisdiction. Okay, that is why countries like what do you call it, like Chad and Mali and Niger are trying to get out of it, to opt out. Because if you opt out, you're not part of it. Nobody can touch you. Simple as that.
Yeah. And what do you think this now means for the African Union, which itself, as we know, had a complicated relationship with the ICC over the years?
Well, it had this complicated relationship with the ICC, for the reasons, we've just discussed, prior. Okay, I remember when Omar Bashir was president of Sudan.
Yes.
The ICC placed an international arrest warrant on him. And he was supposed to travel to, I think, South Africa, for
Yes.
at an AU summit or so. At that time, Zuma was the president. And everybody was expecting Zuma to arrest Omar Bashir when he arrived in Pretoria, but he didn't. So it's a question of political will. Again, the AU cannot. There's so much the AU can do. The AU can point out maybe the inequities, okay, within the ICC system jurisdiction. But there's so much it can do. It can only talk, but hasn't got any effective means of watching the ICC in its work.
Yeah, it was a very complicated matter because South African courts later ruled that the government had acted unconstitutionally and had
Yeah, you
broken
remember,
domestic
yeah.
law for failing to arrest a head of state who was essentially wanted. Now, ultimately, do you think that Chad's withdrawal signals a turning point of some sort for international justice, or is this an instance where it's another setback that the court will perhaps survive and just move on? Well, how do you assess that?
Well, the court is not going to collapse because a few countries have left.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
so the question we need to look at is, look, is it going to ensure, equity, you know, in the way, it works, in the exercising its jurisdiction. I mean, look, I know there are some former heads of state from, I think, Bosnia, the former Yugoslav, you know, republic, right, who were tried by the ICC. Okay, but it needs to make sure that it operates, equitably, across the board,
Mm-hmm.
right? It needs to shed that um, um, cloak of being partial or being maybe victimizing weaker states like
Mm.
African states. So that's what it needs to do to ensure that to ensure equity in whatever it does in its jurisdiction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening and really just breaking that down. The implications of this decision are not going to essentially break the International Criminal Court. Of course, giving us some analysis is Africa analyst and publisher of Africa Briefing, Jonathan Offei-Ansah.